And thanks for making it to Veterans Info Tap. I'm glad you made it. The VA has made an update in its database, and I want to bring it to you. Make sure you're aware of what's going on, how it works, see if we can uncover any nuggets along the way, and do my best to highlight anything that should be highlighted, I guess. Only without a highlighter. I'll do it with my words. All right, so hey, with that, hit the thumbs up, subscribe, share with a friend, all that good stuff. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. The two asks, hit the thumbs up, let the video run. If you have the ability to, I get it. Everybody has short attention spans, so that's part of the issue. So moving on, if you want to support the channel in other ways, you can become a member. You can do that by going to the homepage. You'll see highlighted members there. Thank you to all you members. I do my best to get back to you in the comments and acknowledge your comments. And there's a join button where those highlighted members are. Thank you again so much. I really do appreciate your support. All right, so with that, let's jump into this. Veterans Affairs updates its database for burn pit research. Okay, now there's a couple different things here. Burn pits are not anything new. Ask Vietnam era veterans, right? Korean veterans, whatever. The burn pits have been around, right? So my question before we even get into this is there's two things that you need to think about. One is, sure, it's great to have all of the presumptive conditions for all of our Gulf War stuff with regard to burn pits and all the research and things that are happening. That is a huge win, and any new things that get attributed to burn pits are awesome. Needs to happen. Now, for anybody else who's outside of the presumptive window due to service location, so forth, here's the thing. There's an argument for you to be made that if the threshold is at least likely as not, and you can somehow, in your words, statements from other people that you served with, that can voice the scenario of we had burn pits and we were around it, and I have one of these conditions which are attributed to burn pits, see presumptives for Gulf War. Well, who's to say that that's not at least as likely as not to get you a service connection by going through the full process of getting service connected for X, right? So it's just something to think about. I think that when you see presumptives come out for specific circumstances, you could then make the argument for other areas that might not be covered by the presumptive situation, right? So, for example, Agent Orange stuff. If you were at a base in the U.S. that was using Agent Orange or testing it or whatever, and you are around it a lot, and somehow, some way, you can prove that Agent Orange was at your location, and that maybe you had an MOS or something like that, or AFSC that corresponded with being around it. Well, I think that with a little bit of additional documentation, working with your doctor, that type of stuff, get the Nexus Letter, that you could put yourself in a good position to get service connected, even though it's not a presumptive. Same thing with burn pits, okay? So I just want to open up that awareness a little bit, and don't shortchange yourself. Don't self-segregate out of it. Well, burn pits, I don't have, I'm not, I don't have any presumptives for burn pits, so who cares? Well, if you were around burn pits, then maybe you do need to pay attention, because you might be able to leverage this information for a service connection through direct service connection without the presumptive. Sure, it's a little more work. You got to do a little more digging. You got to provide a little more evidence. You got to work with your doctor, get buddy statements, that type of stuff. But I mean, it could be worth it in the long run, right? Treat it like it's $1 million deal, because it is. All right, so let's jump back into it. Sorry for that long segue. As it treats veterans exposed to the hazards of burn pits, the Veterans Health Administration is also trying to better understand the burn pit phenomenon. And moving on, it says here that's where the burn pit registry comes in. It's a database with information on veterans and their burn pit related ailments. Join in the Federal Drive with Tom Timon with more about the burn pit registry and some recent updates to it. VA's Undersecretary for Health, Dr. Sharif Ellenhall. Now, I found this on the Federal News Network, and it's kind of a back and forth interview style article, but I just wanted to read out a couple things here directly from Sharif Ellenhall. All right, so it goes on here to say from Sharif Ellenhall, he says, I'll start by describing the law that enables us to do this, which is the PACT Act. The PACT Act was signed by President Biden in August of 2022, and that law allowed us to finally meet the extensive needs of veterans exposed to toxic substances like burn pits. More veterans who are exposed to Agent Orange, let me read that again. So it says, finally meet the extensive needs for veterans exposed to toxic substances like burn pits, more veterans who are exposed to Agent Orange in Vietnam and other toxic substances. And since that law was passed, we've enrolled more than 740,000 new veterans into the system, which is 34% increase over the 2-year period before the PACT Act was signed. All right, so moving on. The question here, or the statement from Tom Timon is, and you bring a good point up too, and that is, I think people think of burn pits as something recent, but you mentioned they go back to Vietnam. This was a military response to getting rid of stuff. Yeah, burn pits, unfortunately, if you see pictures of them, large clouds of black smoke, because of all the waste and refuse in some of these stationed areas in Central Command were dumped into these large pits and then burned. So it's not hard to imagine that people who have significant issues, especially respiratory problems breathing, and all that sort of lung issues that come with it because of that exposure. But we now have more than 300 categories of conditions that we associate with burn pit exposure that can allow veterans to get benefits that are considered to be disabilities from their service in Central Command. Tom Timon says, one question about that, you say 300 possible conditions. How do you just, from a medical standpoint, a scientific standpoint, assure yourself that these 300 weren't conjured up because people come in with different ailments, and that they were also burn pit? And so, therefore, it gets associated with burn pit. How do you make sure you're really not confusing cause and effect across 300 possible situations? So basically they're saying, how can you be sure that it's from a burn pit and not just from life, right? I would say exacerbation, right? So, I mean, that's even if it was something from life, just being around a burn pit is going to cause more issues, or to expedite the process of an issue that might be kind of dormant, right? So anyway, it's a good question. This is Sharif Ellenhall. It's a good question. We are benefiting from the authority right in the law to be able to just give veterans the benefit of the doubt when they file a claim, and assume that those conditions are associated with their exposure. And so we have the mindset that we want to give the veteran the benefit of the doubt as much as possible and confer maximum benefits and health care access. We do, however, need to continue studying other conditions that might be associated with burn pits, and that's exactly what this new burn pit registry is all about. Previously, we had the registry, and it required very long questionnaire, required veterans to wait, sometimes weeks, even months, to get an exam, and has been ultimately assessed to be not useful for high quality research. This new registry changes that. Moving on, it says from Tom Timon, all right, what about it is different than simply people signing up and saying, what's the matter with them? Well, the answer from Sharif Ellenhall, well, the first and most important thing is that we now automatically include about 4.7 million veterans whose deployment data out of the Department of Defense shows that they were likely exposed to burn pits before we required veterans to contact us. Now we automatically include their information in this database. So this is important to know for those that have maybe issues with that. You're automatically in this database. So unless you physically tell the VA, right, not to. So that is a big change. I think it's good, and I think that they need that. But, people are people, and some people don't want their information floating all over the place. So moving on, it says now we automatically include their information in this database. So it's much more comprehensive. It's much more amenable to research that we can use to discover new conditions associated with burn pits. But if veterans don't want to have their information in this registry, they can opt out. There's a specific website where they'll fill out their information, and within minutes they can tell us that they don't want to be in this database and opt out. Now, our experience with things like the Million Veterans Program, which veterans, more than 1 million veterans, voluntarily decided to give their DNA into the database for research, shows that veterans overwhelmingly want their information to help discover new therapies and new insights to help other veterans. There isn't a single group who wants to benefit veterans more than veterans themselves. And so we encourage veterans to take their data in, but it's ultimately their choice if they want to opt out. Again, this is now not an opt-in situation with the registry, but rather an opt-out. So you would have to physically opt out, take those steps yourself to opt out of the registry. Tom Timon goes on to say, we are speaking with Dr. Sharif Ellenhall. He is the Veterans Affairs Department Undersecretary for Health. Tell us what data specifically in there, and what data is specifically in there, and you've added some new sets of data in this update to the registry for the process. So it says from Sharif Ellenhall, it is deployment data, so where people were stationed and for how long, and it's also demographic information, so basic information like age, race, ethnicity, and some other bits of data that are important for discovering insights and especially new conditions that might be associated with burn pits. We can also associate more clinical information and add data to that registry for research. But if we were to add data, we would have to get the consent of veterans, and so we have a process for that where if you're a part of a cohort that we want to do much more in-depth research on, you would be contacted to get your consent as a veteran before that. But this is the most basic, complete information set for us to be able to do really high quality research. I do want to mention though, Tom, that ultimately the way that you actually get benefits in healthcare is a separate process. If a veteran thinks they've been exposed to burn pits and have a condition associated with it, the registry doesn't have anything to do with that. You can just go to the va.gov/PACT and apply for benefits and healthcare. All right, so I'm going to do one more Q&A here on this. I think the big piece is the opting out piece. So let's see. So from Tom, it says, from a research standpoint, what type of research can you do, right? Beyond simply having demographics and all that stuff. So Dr. Sharif Ellenhall says, we have ways to easily tie clinical information to information in the registry. And so if we want to investigate a specific question like we're doing right now with leukemia and multiple myeloma, we can take that data from up to 9 million enrolled veterans and associated, but we will not do that unless we get specific consent of individual veterans. So what this is really a platform for more specific research that we can do to tie conditions with burn pit exposure. So it's the basic foundation for us to be able to do that research. So in other words, it's getting a big pool of people that all have a commonality of burn pits. Then as they start to see different aspects that they want to research, they're going to reach out to that pool of people and say, do you consent for us to dig in and get a little more information on this specific situation? And then if in fact it does all come back and really links up to, yep, this really looks like it's a burn pit exposure related condition, then the VA can then turn that into a new presumptive condition and add it to the presumptive list, making it easier for veterans to get that service connection by a presumptive, eliminating the need for the nexus. You as the veteran would not need to show proof that your condition was caused by or somehow associated with your service, but rather prove that you served in a specific location during a certain time period, and then you would be allotted that condition as a service-connected condition. So with that, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you. Have a great one, and remember, if we don't take care of each other, something went wrong.